generative AI in research and what are the ethical challenges. The talk I'm going to give today is based on this paper that was published earlier this year, Maintaining Research Integrity in the Age of GenAI, an analysis of ethical challenges and recommendations to researchers, that I published together with a group of people connected to the European Network for Academic Integrity, Lorna Weddington, Mike Perkins, Tomasz Fotynek, Sabuj Bhattacharya, and Deborah Weber-Wolf. And we come from a bit different fields. And why we were interested in these questions was that, of course, as Stefan has said, we have a rapid adoption of generative AI in academic research. And already in 2023, we had about 1% of abstracts that were submitted to the preprint repository contained evidence of GenAI tool usage. And of course, this is increasing for every day nowadays. Almost everyone is using GenAI in some way or another. And this, of course, raises urgent ethical and integrity challenges. Much of the focus about GenAI usage from the beginning, when ChatGPT was launched 3 years ago, raised concerns about related to students' use of GenAI tools. And there was quite limited research that explored the use of GenAI in the context of academic research. There were some papers that focused on specific disciplines, but a bit less on the ethical challenges across a broad spectrum of research. There were, of course, some papers, such as Resnick and Hosseini, who identified several ethical challenges, such as bias and error, the lack of moral agency that is present in GenAI tools, and the challenges of a lack of explainability of the output from these tools, because we have this black box problem. We don't really know what's going on in these tools and how they come up with their conclusions. In addition, several guidelines, such as UNESCO guidelines, have been developed and different recommendations. We also have publishers publishing different recommendations for the specific journals. We have COPE guidelines also. So there is some material, but we had kind of a different idea. And before I start talking about the idea, I just want to distinguish what I'm going to talk about today is not just AI, the focus is on the GenAI tools that are generated content. AI, here's the definition from the European Commission. There are systems that appear to have intelligent behavior by analyzing their environment and taking actions with some degree of autonomy to achieve specific goals. There are many different types of AI, and GenAI, generative AI, is one of these types of tools. These are systems, as you know, that create new content in response to prompts based on the training data. In academia, we work with texts, so we usually use large language models, first and foremost. And these systems are not really intelligent in a way we perceive intelligence. It's basically a system that is trained to statistically predict word, character, or sentence sequences in a given context. They have actually been around since 1980s, and they are used in machine translation, for instance, similar technology. And we don't usually think about Google Translate, of course, as a form of GenAI, but actually it is. They're used in automatic speech recognition, for document classification, etc. The difference now is that data sets are becoming a lot bigger and bigger, and they have more and more parameters, more and more connections between different words, which can create better statistical predictions. But basically, it's all about statistics. What word sounds best after the next word? So the aim of our paper is basically to look at the research life cycle and to map ethical challenges across all stages of that process. And we wanted to propose practical recommendations for responsible GenAI use, because we still don't have clear recommendations how to use GenAI. So we posed research questions: what ethical concerns arise from the use of GenAI in different phases of research, and how can researchers use GenAI ethically for research purposes? Very broad questions. Much of the focus for the past 3 years has been on ChatGPT. I usually say it's basically like talking about Windows 95 still. We have actually more than 40,000 different tools. Many of these tools are created for researchers. There are many tools for research, many tools for academic writing. And of course, no one can grasp everything. You can't go through all these tools because they are changing every day. And even if you tried, it will just be outdated the next day, basically. So when discussing how to do this, we decided to create a practice-informed rapid review of peer-reviewed and great literature that has developed since 2022. And we complemented it with a set of targeted, hands-on probes of current GenAI services. So we basically choose some of these services, tested them, and just try to see what happens, and trying to figure out what can go wrong. We also wanted to connect it to the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity and Principles of Good Research Practice. And coming from very different disciplines as a research group, we wanted to use our knowledge in other disciplines like ethics, linguistics, history, medicine, computer science, to perform different type of small experiments and see what happens. So when you do research, basically you do research in a certain way. You start with formulating a hypothesis, you develop your research questions, and then you design your study. Then perhaps you do some literature review to see what's already published, and then you create what study you're going to use, you collect your data, you process your data, you analyze it, you write your text, and then it is sent to peer review, and then it is published. So let's see some of these tools. When it comes to formulating hypotheses and research questions and the study designs, there are several tools. We tested 2 of them. One of them is Kahoot, developed in Sweden, that can give you keywords for literature search, identify research gaps, suggest research methods, develop research questions, suggest a method, give you a paper outline, actually write any part of your text, and even suggest a theoretical framework. Another tool that we tested was ChatGPT. So both of those tools can generate hypotheses. What happened when we tried that is that we realized that many of the questions that were given to us when it comes to hypotheses were already well explored in the existing literature, which kind of suggested that when trying to use these tools to identify hypotheses, you might end up with questions that are not really novel. In addition, these tools generated summaries that were often too close to the sentence structure of source abstracts from existing literature, which kind of raised concerns about inadvertent plagiarism if you would use these summaries by future authors. So yes, you can use it. You can produce. There is research that has found that you can find innovative questions when developing hypotheses, but it is also contested in the literature. Another problem, ethical problem we found is, of course, that in all of these tools, they are not based on scientific objective literature. They are based on whatever is on the internet. So they are based on Reddit, they are based on everything you have. And what we have on internet is very stereotypical. It's reproducing all the stereotypes, all sexism, all racism, everything you have. So using these tools to create hypotheses may reinforce the biases that are in the structure of these tools. In addition, when these tools were developed, people thought, okay, it might not be a good idea, to ask ChatGPT, for instance, how can I create a bomb to blow, Uppsala University or something? So if you ask it, you will get, no, I can't give you that. And there are many questions you can't ask because some very poorly paid people in Kenya were sitting for months and deleting what you can ask. So there is a kind of censorship that is built in these systems as well. What happens when you have that is that it kind of restricts our academic freedom because we should be able to ask all questions and do research about everything. So because of this ethical training, our academic freedom is limited because we can't explore certain topics in the proposed research questions. So the next step in the research process is creating a literature review. Here is an example of one of these tools called Elicit, the AI research assistant, which promises that it uses language models to help you automate research workflows like parts of literature review. Elicit can find relevant papers without perfect keyword match, summarize takeaways from the paper specific to a question, and extract key information from the papers. So I just put like AI in education in here. I got a bunch of papers, and here I got a summary, 1-sentence summary of the abstract, because who has time to read the whole abstract? It sounds great, doesn't it? There are some problems though if you use GenAI for literature review. First of all, we found that not all literature that was found when prompting was relevant. In one case, 90% of the literature was not relevant to the prompt. And they seemed to be the result of simple word searches and not the meaning of the multi-word terms. In addition, we found fabricated references and, of course, a bunch of predatory papers. Because GenAI cannot distinguish between papers that are peer-reviewed from predatory papers. Which means that there is a huge risk that we contaminate research with papers and I've seen predatory papers about polar bears turning into people and Star Wars Force being used as a medication for cancer and stuff like that. All of that can come into scientific literature. And it's already happening. We have research that is performed that predatory papers are cited, non-peer-reviewed papers are cited in legit literature. So even if you use some of these tools to find more papers, you still need to double-check every single paper to see if it's predatory or not. Because, of course, predatory papers are not marked as we are not peer-reviewed. They look legit. And this is very important, especially to discuss with students, because for them, this might be tricky. They might not be aware that many of the things they find on internet labeled as scientific papers are actually pure garbage. And then you find all these papers, then you can go and read them. And if you want to see if these papers are worth reading, you might put them in some of the AI tools, such as Notebook, that can give you a summary of that paper, and that can give you kind of questions. It can also give you a podcast with two Americans talking about your paper, which might be fun to listen to, and so you can see if it's worth reading. However, what happens when you use GenAI to summarize a paper to see if it's worth reading? Well, these summaries are not based on critical thinking, and they are actually decreasing your critical thinking. There is research on that as well. And even if you read them afterwards, you will read them through the lens of this tool that is very biased. If you listen to that podcast, you will read the paper based on that podcast. So there are problems with that. They can also create quite a few mistakes. We provided one of these tools with a paper some of our co-authors wrote earlier. We tested, in addition to Notebook, ChatPDF. They could provide a reasonable summary of key findings, but it failed to answer simple questions about the authors of the study and the methodology. It hallucinated the list of authors. It claimed that the paper did not explicitly mention key results, despite them being included. Notebook was able to provide these questions, to give answers to these questions, but there are ethical issues, not only critical thinking decrease. It's about intellectual property rights and copyright ownership. Many of these systems require users to confirm that they hold copyright for uploaded content. Some platforms are even requesting users to upload their bibliography and copies of the papers relevant to the topic being explored. We are very spoiled in Sweden because our libraries give us access to papers that are behind a paywall. Whatever is open source, open access is already the database. But the agreements that we have with our libraries actually do not cover us uploading papers that are behind the paywall that we have access to these platforms, feeding these tools and increasing the database. Another ethical concerns, if you find so many papers in this CZLI, we are going to see all these references these long references with 30 papers. When we use references should support our arguments. If you have 30 papers, it becomes very unclear in what ways these 30 papers are supporting your argument. You will have quite a lot of citations that are not relevant. It kind of makes noise and decreases the quality of the paper. Of course, some of these papers are going to be hallucinated, and that can also be a problem if you don't double check. In many cases, the outputs you get, all these summaries, all these podcasts, they're very colloquial. They're not in academic tone, which can change our perception and our writing as well. So there are quite a few ethical concerns. When it comes to copyright ownership, you have to be aware, because we don't usually read the terms and conditions of the services we use, or just skim through them. We are usually not aware that there are some restrictions, and this issue is highlighted, for example, by the Journal of Urology, on the journal homepage, where they clarify that users do not hold the relevant rights to upload material taken from the journal to an external GenAI tool. So, the next step. We have our hypothesis, we have our literature review, done with or without GenAI. now we want to design the study and to collect the data. Many GenAI tools can be used to create surveys and interview questions, and one of the main ethical problems in this area is that GenAI can perpetuate biases, again, and lack sensitivity and contextual understanding, which results in questions being discriminatory or skewed and assuming stereotypes, and they fail to accommodate different perspectives. They can even inflict harm and distress, which can lead to biased data collection. And of course, you can say that even human written text can be biased, but they're kind of biased in different ways. We are all biased, but when we publish our papers, different researchers will have different biases. So you will get kind of a balance. Using GenAI, we will end up with reinforcing the major stereotypes, making the voices of the people that are biased in non-traditional way, perhaps, less heard. Another topic is, of course, the problem that I have already mentioned about censorship. So sensitive topics might be censored. I think ethical training is in some way great, but it can, as I have said, interfere with the freedom of academic inquiry because it censors researchers regarding the types of questions that can be asked. When it comes to, and then of course, if you upload your unpublished instruments, if you upload your surveys or interview questions, it can be leaked because you are feeding the database. In some cases, you need informed consent also, and some people can use GenAI to create it. Problem is, of course, that it can hallucinate. It can omit information about the research you are performing. And of course, if the data is stored externally, you might have some privacy violations. Another way you can use GenAI when you collect your data is to use it for transcription. Because it reduces manual labor. It's quite boring to do transcripts. But the problem is, of course, if the data is stored externally, that you might end up with privacy violations. And so don't put any personal information in GPT or some other tool because of the GDPR. And be aware that personal information is not only social security number, email, and the name. Any combination of information that can identify a person can be personal information. If you if you interview me and have a senior lecturer in research ethics and Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian in Sweden, I'm the only person. I can be very identifiable in that way. In addition, when it comes to transcription, you might have different errors and hallucinations, and it's very bad in transcription of minority accents, research has shown, which is quite problematic. If we go to the next step, using GenAI in data processing and analysis, if you want to prepare or transform raw data into form which is suitable for analysis, you can use GenAI in two different ways. You can use it to directly analyze the data, or you can use it to get advice about what analytical methods should be appropriate, and then you perform your research by yourself using the different tools. However, if you're an early career researcher, hasn't done much research, what you might end up is with kind of uncertainty about what processing steps are suitable, and you can end up with improper methodology. So I usually say, especially to PhD students that I teach, that when you that using the technology is not always the best idea, simply. Because you need to know if the output is good or bad. So you still need discipline knowledge. You need to perform research in order to understand if whatever GenAI is suggesting is good or bad. You need to have this prior knowledge. If you rely too much on GenAI tools, you will never be certain that that was the best. You will just copy-paste it. When processing and analyzing, you can use GenAI, of course, in different ways. You can use it for data anonymization. The problem is, of course, that it can potentially de-anonymize individuals based on the remaining contextual information, which raises concerns regarding the balance between privacy protection and data usability. And of course, it also exists when humans are doing it. So in most cases, of course, transmitting personal or sensitive data to third parties without explicit consent is forbidden. So that might also be something actually to think about when developing informed consent. Even if you're using non-external GenAI, it might be a good idea to explain how the data will be processed in your informed consent. Another risk is, of course, that the tool may fail to locate all personal identifiers. Once again, it also applies to human anonymizers. But what is really important is to double check for forgotten personal data and to see if this is something you would like to publish on. When it comes to qualitative analysis, we tested different tools like Claude, Opus, that can theme and code data. And it was able to pretty accurately interpret user requests that were relating to specific methodologies and create themes from the data. But there are some risks that we identified, especially when it comes to data interpretation and accuracy. So GenAI tools can quickly generate codes and subcodes and themes, but you have problems. They create fictional quotes. They hallucinate. It's just a statistical tool. The statistical tool that puts the next words after each other in a very convincing way, like mansplaining or AI planning, but it hallucinates a lot. And then, of course, you can have false evidence that can lead to research fabrication. And we still have the black box problem. We don't know why you get these themes. There is a lack of transparency that is built in these systems. When it comes to quantitative analysis, GenAI tools are able to perform forms of statistical analysis through the integration of Python libraries. However, there are risks with that as well. It can automate statistical steps, but may misapply methods. There is a risk of p-hacking or misuse of statistical methods. And because we don't know how this is performed because of the black box problems and stochastic outputs, it is very hard to replicate, which is a part of scientific process. In some fields, images, of course, something used, but we can even use images like in presentations. The problems here are that all the images are based on something people have already done, and you can infringe copyright. It can also create inaccurate representation of input texts in AI-generated images and videos. And there is a lack of clarity about the protection and sharing of user data and input information. So there is really a huge risk of copyright violations because we don't have information on the sources of images and videos. Might not be the best idea, even if you cite the source, even if you have it in your presentations. It might be more honest to just try to find a picture. There are many free pictures on the internet. Perhaps might be a better idea, and credit actually the person who has created the image. Code generation is also something we can use GenAI for. The accuracy of the code can be problematic. It's not always correct. And another ethical problem is that GenAI will reuse code that is under non-free license. So there are there can be license violations there. So now you have it out there. It's time to write something. And we write quite a lot in academia, many different genres. One of them is grant proposals, of course. I was really shocked when the Swedish Research Council decided that they will not prohibit applicants from using GenAI. I was very surprised by that decision, but of course, you can understand that because no one can check. In a previous paper, the same research group did, we tested different AI detectors. They don't work. They have many false positives and false negatives. We decided not to recommend them to be used in academia. So you can't really detect this. So on that, it might be, understandable that they just decided we can't stop it. So let's just tell people they can use it. However, even if it's not prohibited, the risks of having hallucinations is large. The risk of downgraded novelty, that your grant proposal will have lower originality than if you would do it for yourself. And of course, another problem, if you put your proposal in a GenAI tool, then it will end up in the database. Of course, if you pay for GPT, they say that you can opt out from feeding the database. I don't really trust them. Do you? So the risk is that even before you start your research, your ideas are going to be in the database. It doesn't mean that someone, I don't know, in some other country is going to end up with your whole proposal. But you will increase the statistics of the word connections, and especially if you use some special terms, suddenly they will appear in someone else's text. When it comes to the text generation, I told you already that ethical training of the GenAI limits academic freedom and access to research areas. One of our colleagues from Quotas, Luna Beddington, she works with genocide studies, and she told me she can't ask many questions because it's limited, it's all the time. No, you can't ask these questions, which really limits the freedom of the inquiries she can pose to GenAI. When it comes to text generation, hallucinations, another, once again, the same problem, misinformation, flawed conclusions that can undermine the credibility of the research. There is also a risk of producing biased or discriminatory content. And we have this problem that the questions, the concepts of plagiarism and originality will change. Another colleague of mine from the University of Calgary, Sarah Lane-Eaton, she's saying that we already live in a post-plagiarism world. We are still using in academia concepts of plagiarism and originality that were actually predate internet. And now suddenly these concepts are changing. Already with internet, with Google Docs, we can go into each other's sentences, writing with each other. So the question is whose sentence this is when we co-author papers. In addition, if you use content generated by GenAI, you might end up with inadvertent plagiarism because sometimes they are too close to the source. So yes, if you use it, cite it correctly. But it's not only about, creating content and then putting it out in a paper. We use it quite a lot, for instance, for text editing. So I kind of differentiate between using GenAI as a supplementary tool, starting with your content and making it better in different ways, or using it as an author, just copy pasting it. But even if you just add it, there are risks of biases or of inaccuracies in summarizing information or citing sources. Sometimes it forgets the quotation marks, which can lead to plagiarism. It can create tortured phrases instead of standard terminology. So big data becomes colossal information, for instance, and breast cancer was in parallel, etc. You can end up with language errors, especially. It works quite well in English, but if you use it in some other languages, it can be problematic. However, it is a very good proofreading tool. I usually prompt it as proofread, don't change the content, and tell me what was wrong, so I actually learned something from it. The problem is that it can change the meaning of the text, and it can add things that are actually more than proofreading. Even Grammarly, now that everyone was using to check the grammar and to proofread, is now an AI tool that can edit more than for pure proofreading, just changing the grammar and the sentence structure. It is a very good translation tool, which is helpful, of course, for non-native speakers or accessibility. The problem is that it works in 250 languages, something like that. However, we have 7,000 languages in the world. So most of the people can't use this in their mother tongue, which increases the technological divide we have between people that can use this in their mother tongue and people that actually will never be able to use it. Risks, of course, with translations are bias again. It can mix different standards, especially for languages that are not in the database on the same level as English. In my case, Bosnian, Croatian, Serbian is quite often mixed, and I can recognize the differences. One thing that's worth noting, when we tested AI detectors, it turned out that even if you write your text yourself and then use machine translation like Google Translate, the AI detectors will, in many cases, flag your text as an AI-produced text. It's very important to know because many of our students especially are using GenAI or Google Translate writing in their own languages. So if you use AI detectors, you might accuse a student of using GenAI to create the text, even if that's not the case. That's one of the problems with the detectors. And after that, we come to the ethical publishing. So you can use, of course, GenAI for peer review. We have problems. I'm an editor of a journal. We always have problems finding peer reviewers. And it seems like a good idea, but it raises quite a few issues. First of all, breaches of confidentiality. because we usually have double peer review and these texts are not published yet. It can amplify bias, and you need to disclose if AI has been used. Of course, if you are a peer reviewer, double check with the editor what they think about it. But I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's too important part of science today, because this is the only safeguard we have. And outsourcing it to a tool will lower the scientific quality. We don't have actually many rules when it comes to how we should use GenAI in an ethical way, except one. There is one rule everyone seems to agree on. In January 23, 2 months after ChatGPT was launched, there were some cases where ChatGPT was listed as a co-author of a paper. And then everyone agreed, no, you shouldn't do that because GenAI cannot take responsibility for the text. Human is always responsible, so you should list it as a tool, but you can't put it as a co-author of a paper. I think that's the only rule we have where everyone agrees. Another problem we have with GenAI and ethical publishing is that nowadays we have an industrialization of cheating. A lot of people earning a lot of money to help people cheat. We have paper mills, we have predatory journals, we have different types of co-authorship trade, and of course they are all using GenAI. So these problems are going to increase. However, GenAI can also be used to combat such practices in different ways, but the problem is going to increase. So when we went through all of this, we wanted to use the European Code of Conduct for Research Integrity, which says that good research practice is based on 4 fundamental principles, such as reliability in ensuring quality of research, reflected in the design, the methodology, the analysis, and the use of resources, honesty in developing, undertaking, reviewing, reporting, and communicating research in a transparent, fair, full, and unbiased way, respect for colleagues, research participants, society, ecosystems, cultural heritage, and the environment, and accountability for the research from idea to publication, for its management and organization, for training, supervision, and mentoring, and for its wider impacts. And then we wanted to see all these main ethical challenges that we have identified, such as lack of transparency, copyright violations, privacy, inadvertent plagiarism, bias, censorship, and fabrication, including hallucinations and false data sets. And we ended up with recommendations. We wanted to see for each ethical issue what ethical principles might be violated, and then provide recommendations for researchers. So if you have a lack of transparency, you violate the principles of honesty and accountability. And we recommend that if you use GenAI for data analysis, for content creation, or for other substantive tasks, you need to disclose it. If you use it for minor text editing, or to improve your language, to grammar and spelling, or just to find literature, you don't need to disclose it, but for the sake of transparency, it might be good. But there is a difference between when it is absolutely necessary and when it, depending on the context, might perhaps be okay. But we definitely recommend to transparently describe how GenAI was used in the methods or in the acknowledgement section. We also recommend, especially for PhD students, to create a research diary. You can use OneNote or Notion or something, and then write what you have done, and perhaps take screenshots. when you use GenAI, because the rules might change, which is especially important for PhD students, because in 4 years, when they end their studies, there might be some other rules. So it's good to have some kind of proof. When it comes to the question of privacy, respect and accountability might be violated if you upload personal data to GenAI. So we recommend to avoid uploading confidential, sensitive, or personally identifiable data, and to develop protocols for managing data security. And then we recommend peer reviewers not to upload manuscripts to GenAI for reasons of privacy and confidentiality. Copyright issues, respect and honesty might be violated if you use copyrighted material without permission. So we don't think it should be uploaded without the copyright holder's permission. You might end up with inadvertent plagiarism and copyright breach because of that, because you're using someone else's text. So honesty is at stake here. So if you use AI-generated content directly quoted, then you can reference it. It is necessary to be honest there as well. Bias is another problem. Of course, reliability and respect might be at stake here, because it can provide incorrect answers, and it can violate respect for research participants. So to reduce it, it really needs evaluation, human oversight, because we are responsible for the outputs of our work. When it comes to the question of censorship and GenAI tools censoring the outputs, respect and honesty might be violated. So once again, human oversight is needed so that GenAI tools do not exclude or suppress important research information. And last but not least, fabrication. Of course, fabrication directly challenges honesty in research and reliability of the research process. So we recommend validation of all GenAI outputs by cross-referencing them with trusted sources, and human oversight, once again, is necessary. Especially, GenAI should not be used to create or manipulate research data and results, and for instance, generate images and plots using GenAI. So it should be approached with utmost caution and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonja, for a very depressing in a way, but also very interesting survey of these GenAI tools.